David Fetter, Executive Editor Technical for Prepared Foods. Welcome to a Prepared Foods presentation on ingredient trends in new product development. Joining us today is Amy Uziak. She's R&D lead for the JPG Resources Group. They're a leading food and beverage innovation house specializing in new product development, scale-ups, and fueling market growth. Now, today we're going to be discussing sweetener applications to lower the sugar in beverages. And when we talk about sugar, we're referring mostly to your caloric sweeteners, sucrose, fructose, glucose, and we use just sugar as the generic. Amy has more than 20 years of experience in product development and commercialization. She's just the right person to share with us her keen knowledge of the full range of sweeteners and implications of their usage in crafting better-for-you drinks. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, David. It's great to be here with you today.
Great. Glad to have you. Now, the drive to lower added caloric sugars, it shows no signs of easing up. And ingredient technologists, as well as food and beverage developers, are bringing increasing refinement to the process of substituting non-caloric sweeteners with low or non-caloric ones. But it seems that beverages have proven especially challenging since there are just so many parameters in these liquid products that you have to cover. You've got solubility, pH, temperature of processing, temperature of usage, stability, shelf life. And, that's even before you get to the basics of color, texture, flavor. Where do you start when you're called upon to lower the sugar in a drink?
Hey, David, great question. I think the main thing to understand when starting any project in food or beverages are the product guardrails. What's the brand trying to accomplish? What ingredients are they open to using? What claims do they want to make? What do they want their nutrition facts panel to look like? It's also important to understand what type of food or beverage it is and to see where they sit compared to their competitive set. In addition, it's key to understand the role the traditional sweetener, caloric sweetener, would have played in that style of food or beverage. Was it purely for sweetness, or did it provide other functionality, structure, mouthfeel, bulking, browning, etc.? As you mentioned, understanding the parameters of the base, packaging, and shelf life and process all play a part in choosing the right alternate sweetener as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So those are the great fundamentals. Let's veer over to the ingredients themselves. And if you could, please share some of the new or up-and-coming low and no-cal sweeteners that are in use or gaining attention possibly for upcoming formulations.
Sure. The newest sweetener replacers that we're seeing on the market these days are the rare sugars, so allulose and tagatose specifically. Rare sugars are monosaccharides that are not metabolized by our body and are considered bulking sweeteners versus the traditional high-intensity sweeteners. Bulking sweeteners have similar bulking to a standard sweetener, but lower in sugar. They're used often could be used at similar levels to products and provide the same sweetness level. Rare sugars are not metabolized by our body. So allulose is the most widely used in the new sweeteners. It's very low in calories. It shows up as 0.4 calories per gram of carbohydrate and no grams of sugar on your side panel. It's got a very low glycemic index and can function similar to traditional sugar, providing some bulking and texture in addition to sweetness. It's less sweet than sugar and does have some restrictions on use due to some of its gastric conditions if used too high. Tagatose has been around for a while, but starting to gain some popularity again, although to a lesser extent. Tagatose is more similar to sugar in sort of its sweetness profile, but it is still labeled on the side panel as grams of sugar. So it depends a lot on if you're looking for caloric reduction or that grams of sugar, which seems to be sort of a go-to place for people to look these days.
Right, and it does bring up a question as to how like tagatose, it only has a third the calorie of sugar, calories of sucrose. So, for the product manufacturer, you're lowering the caloric content, and yet you still have grams of added sugar on the label. So, I guess it is going to be, up to our regulatory watchdogs to see how they can make that a little bit clearer. That a gram is not a gram is not a gram when it comes to calories. A very good point. So, what about, you were talking about high intensity sweeteners, and they are still using the artificial high intensity sweeteners. We don't want to give them short shrift. So what can you tell us, just real quick thumbnail on some of the artificial high intensity sweeteners?
Yeah, so there's both artificial high intensity sweeteners, sort of your traditional sucralose, ACE-K, aspartame, saccharin. I mean, a lot of those have been around for a long time. Um, and they all, and then your natural high intensity sweeteners, sort of stevia and monk fruit. And I would say each one of them has its own advantages and disadvantages as to how they work. A lot of the artificial high intensity sweeteners um, have restrictions around pH and heat and which ones can be used in which situations. So you need to take that into account. They all also have sort of very different time intensity presentation of sweetness. Sugar is like this beautiful bell curve of sweetness. It's clean, it presents throughout the product. These high intensity sweeteners, both natural and artificial, sort of like spike sweetness at the beginning, the middle, or the end. And so that's why lots of times we have to use sort of a toolbox version to kind of figure out the right sweetness or combination of sweeteners to use based on the product, the acidity, the solubility, the pH, and how we want that flavor to be expressed in a product.
So, so clearly they have, each of these has their advantages and disadvantages. And then, of course, when talking about the high intensity ones, in addition to the time, the duration, yeah, that's the other, they linger. I've noticed that
Yes.
almost all of them linger.
And
So,
it seems like yes, they all have like a lingering sort of aftertaste, and it's not always pleasant. And it seems to be everybody has their own reaction to each one of them. You'll talk to one person, they'll say like, I can't do stevia, and the next person says I can't do monk fruit, and somebody else is like, oh, aspartame gives me a headache. So if you're looking for like sort of that low sugar, no sugar alternative, I think people have their favorites that they go to. I think people also have like, I'm not going to do artificial. I don't like the natural one. So a lot of that is sort of the specific choice. I would also, the high intensity sweeteners are used at tiny, tiny, tiny amounts. And so you're using where sugar, may have been in, in one of your traditional sweetened beverages at 25 grams per serving, and now you're putting in, like 0.01 grams of a high intensity sweetener. So there's all of that ingredient that you need to backfill. So beverage is nice because sometimes that can just be water, but they also do provide some mouthfeel that you need to replace in some of them. Some of them you don't necessarily need that, but
you and I were talking a little bit earlier, and as you said, there's no magic bullet when it comes to replacing sucrose for taste and functionality. And you're absolutely right. Just tick off all the advantages of sucrose. I know we're talking about replacing it, but sucrose, glucose, what does that bring to a beverage?
yeah, so I mean, sucrose, glucose can bring some texture, mouthfeel. It gives the beverage a bit of body. It definitely brings that sort of clean sugar profile, like I said, that you get evenly sort of throughout the product. It has like a nice, pleasant, lingering sweetness, no metallic, bitter sort of off notes. It melds well often with the other ingredients that are naturally in the beverage, whether it's, fruit juices or coffees or whatever you have going in there. Some beverages, if you're processing them in a way, it can bring some brownie notes to it. So there's lots of different things that sucrose brings to a beverage, differently even than in a baked good or something where sugar can add so many other pieces of functionality to a product as far as structure and texture and all of those kinds of things. but it still provides a lot with even within a beverage. It's also sucrose is very neutral pH. It works well in sort of any pH system. It works well sort of whether you heat it or not heat it. So it just seems to be kind of universally able to be used. And so then when you're trying to replace it, you really just have to pick and choose carefully depending on how that beverage is processed, the environment of the beverage, the pH of the beverage, all of those types of things. So which is, again, like we say often, why we have to use sort of like that toolbox approach.
Yes, and you know what? From what I understand in beverages, it also has a good freeze point depression, so you can balance, your freeze point that way too.
Yeah, some of the high intensity sweeteners aren't going to do that. And so if you're trying to just replace sugar with water, that's not going to work. But some of the new bulking sugars do have some freeze point depression advantages with them as well. So something to consider if you're doing a frozen smoothie or something like that.
That was a great insight into what sucrose brings to the table. Let's jump back to the sucrose replacers, the alternate sweeteners.
Sure. Most of the alternate sweeteners are a bit spiky in how they present their sweetness and often come with some sort of unpleasant off flavors. By combining more than one of these replacers, you can often provide a bit more balance and reduce off notes. Some of these are also used in conjunction with added flavors, enhancers, maskers, which can help provide a better eating experience as well.
How would a developer go about choosing a combination of sweeteners?
So when a brand comes to us for development, they often have specific guardrails that they're trying to maintain. And so it's our job to show them products using different combinations of ingredients that meet both like the base that they're working with and often inside and outside of their guardrails. We always want them to be able to make choices, understanding everything that's going on. There are a few restrictions with sweetness based on products' pH and temperature during processing, usage, stability, shelf life. This is most obvious with some of the high intensity sweeteners, which tend to break down more quickly as pH and temperature change. The natural high intensity sweeteners are more stable, but they're also more expensive.
Yeah. We've touched on texture a few times. So let's talk a little bit more about moderating texture with some of the available sweeteners and those challenges.
Sure. Like we've said, the high intensity sweeteners, both natural and artificial, are used at very, very low amounts, many times parts per million. When added to a product, then you need to replace sort of the rest of the sugar functionality with something else. Sometimes water in a beverage, but other times some sort of bulking ingredient or sweetener to provide some of the functionality of the sugar, like mouthfeel. This is where bulking sugars come into play, as well as soluble fibers and inulin. All of these ingredients have advantages and disadvantages and need to be selected carefully depending on the final product needs and requirements.
Yeah, that's true. So, we're talking about these. It seems sometimes like it would be odd to add some of these fibers to a beverage, but the ingredient technology now is such that you can without, ending up with a thick slurry. So, tell us a little bit more about some of these additional fibers and.
Yeah, you're not necessarily replacing one-to-one. I think the high intensity sweeteners are giving you some of that sweetness impact, and then these other ingredients, whether it's some of these rare sugars or these other bulking fibers, inulin, stuff like that, are to a lesser extent just fulfilling some of the functionality. So there's never, it seems like, a one-to-one replacement where I can just pull sugar out 100% and put something else in. So you have to work through that combination. And there's also ones that seem to work well closely together. So lots of times people will do a combination, and it seems to be stevia with erythritol because they have synergistic components to it. And a lot of the suppliers are getting really good at supporting you with with that type of things as well, so that you don't have to do all of the work on your own, but can reach out to some of these people who have basic understandings.
Okay, so yeah, you've mentioned that we have the sugar replacement systems, the full toolbox of blends instead of one-to-one drop-ins. Wouldn't beverages be more amenable to a one-to-one sweetener replacer, a sugar replacer? And are there any out there? I know we mentioned allulose and tagatose, but for the most part, are there any true one-to-one replacers for sucrose, glucose, fructose in a beverage?
There are some places where you see people doing a one-to-one replacement. I don't know that you're ever going to get a 100% similar experience as if it was sugar, but you can get close. We see sucralose. So if you're open to artificial, as a replacement in some different beverages. We also see in some of the flavored waters and some of the fruit juices and stuff like that, where they may be able to sort of pick one of the high intensity sweeteners. But a lot of times that also depends on like how sweet are they going for. Some of those flavored waters have like a mild amount of sweetness, and so it works. And like the fruit juices have natural sugars. All of these high intensity sweeteners, if you can use in combination with a small amount of natural sugar, like pop even more. So again, it really comes back to what you're trying to achieve. Allulose and tagatose, which have similar profiles to sugar and the bulking, have limitations on how much you can put into a product. So even though maybe theoretically they look like you could do a one-to-one replacement, there's sort of limits because of gastric distress and things like that, where you wouldn't want to put in the full 25 grams that you might see in a regular beverage. And so it's, again, sort of using that combination to get the right functionality and flavor.
Right, and what you bring up about allulose, I read so far I've only run across one study on gastric disturbance, and that was a single 30-gram dose, and it was a small study. But when you think, like a can of regular Coke is a 12-ounce serving with 31 grams of sucrose, you're right, a one-to-one drop in there might not work. But they do seem to have great promise in beverages as single ingredient solutions, because they've got the clean flavors and, like you said, the right bulking. But yeah, until they solve that issue. Now, and also the grass,
Right.
allulose has a grass of 30 grams per the entire day.
Right. I was going to say allulose also has sort of a limit of, I think it's like 0.4 grams per kilogram of body weight. So
Yeah, exactly.
it's also a little bit lower. So like you'd sort of be maxed out on that side of things as well. So there's a lot of things to consider.
Yeah, the 30-gram single dose was for somebody my size. Someone your size, yeah, don't do it.
Right.
So what other challenges do you encounter when you're lowering caloric sweeteners in a drink?
Sure. Other challenges, specifically with like a high intensity sweetener, are the sweetness build over time, sweetness linger, and the bitter and metallic off notes, depending on the type of sweetener selected. Being intentional on the replacement solution selection is essential to delivering a great beverage. For example, Reb M and Reb A will both provide a superior product experience if 0-calorie stevia-based beverage is needed. However, if you're looking more for low calorie and can use a little bit of cane sugar, Reb M would provide the best consumer experience. So again, it's just super specific on kind of what you're looking to do. And as we've said, given some other examples like low calorie, no calorie, grams of sugar, no grams of sugar. So natural, artificial, like there's so many things to consider besides just the formulation in choosing which combination of ingredients that you're going to use.
So, all right, we are close to time. Before we go, I just wanted to, see if there are any new developments in sweetener systems. I'm talking things like there was a new development in reducing the caloric sugars in juices, orange juice, apple juice. It's I don't think it's on the market yet. It's new technology out of Israel, but they have an enzymatic, I think it's enzymatic system that converts the sugars into fibers, and yet it doesn't alter texture that much. I mean, it's from what I haven't tried it, but from what I'm told, it's barely perceptible, this texture issue. But yet it'll lower those sugars, and by turning them into helpful fibers, you get that added benefit. But that's the only one I can think of. Are there any other new developments in sweetener systems out there that you know?
Yeah, no, I think fermentation, we're going to continue to see that overall. I think even just there's Reb M that's extracted from the stevia plant, but there's also Reb M that's being generated from fermentation that has a really clean flavor. So I think we're going to continue to see some of those things out there. I think as far as beverage development goes, you're going to continue to see low sugar, low calorie, but with benefits. So it's not that they're just talking, you think of the old sort of diet sodas where that's the health benefit was just from the no sugar. And now we're seeing a lot of no sugar, low sugar going into beverages with other benefits. So gut health, energy, focus. And so where that's becoming sort of a given in some of those, and also in combinations where maybe a couple grams of sugar, natural sugar, plus these other things to give you, people don't always need 0 calories, 0 grams of sugar, but, sort of that best taste, best functionality. So it does seem like we're seeing with new systems and old systems, new approaches.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Amy. I know you guys, I know you got to run, and we've taken up a lot of your time. Thanks for sharing your prodigious knowledge of sweeteners and beverage formulations. Now I'm thirsty. So I want to thank our audience for joining us today. I'm David Fetter, Executive Editor Technical for the Prepared Foods Network. We've been chatting with Amy Uziak. She's the R&D lead at the JPG Resources Group. And you can find just many more articles, videos, audio podcasts on sweeteners and beverages at preparedfoods.com. And our website houses an entire library of this type of content, articles, white papers, webinars, infographics, all by the top experts like Amy in the industry. And we hope you'll check that out. So goodbye till next time.